We have been very productive because we've got together all the questions that you've asked, put them into categories, and we have them right here. So we're going to answer today's questions in relation to spouse visas. We've got about 20 questions here, so we'll try and get through as many as we can. And of course, if I've done a video on a question before, I'll just point you to that video, and that'll make this video a little bit shorter. Let's go. What's the minimum income requirement for a UK spouse visa? 29,000. That was an easy one. How can I meet the financial requirement if I'm self-employed or on savings? Well, if you're self-employed, you have to be employed for at least a year because that's how you're going to get your first tax return, and that is a mandatory document that you're going to have to produce. Then, as long as you're paying yourself at least 29,000, you should be perfectly fine. There are a lot of other documents that they're going to be asking for. Just bear that in mind. In terms of savings, I've actually done a video on savings. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as just having 29,000 in your bank account. The first 16,000 isn't even counted, and if you're only using savings, it's going to be about 88,500 that you're going to have in your account for at least 6 months. So 88,500 has to be the lowest amount for a 6-month period before you can use it. Have a look at the other video. It goes into detail about what the requirements are. Next question. Does my partner's income have to be from employment? No. There are 6 different ways in which you can meet the financial requirement. You've got pensions, you've got savings, you have got investments, you have got employment, you have got self-employment. There are 6 different ways. I've done a video on that. Have a look at that video. Very, very useful because it goes into detail and breaks down each one of them and shows you exactly how you need to meet the requirement. Next question. What documents are required to prove my relationship is genuine and subsisting? Again, I've done a video on this, but generally depends if you're talking about somebody who's outside the country or inside the country. If they're outside the country, you have to be able to show that the relationship is genuine and subsisting, which means you're either married or you've been in a relationship for at least 2 years. And then you have to be able to show that you're in constant contact. You're either meeting them, you're flying to them, they're flying to you, you're sending them money, there's shared financial responsibility, and there's constant communication, which means WhatsApp messages and calls. But they have to be sent in a very specific way for them to be weighted evidence. So just bear that in mind. And then you've got somebody who's already in the UK. The best type of evidence for people who are already in the UK is cohabitation. And the Home Office have a particular criteria, and they ask for 6 different sources of evidence. So 6 different companies sending letters to you, and each one of those has to have both of your names on it. Where it doesn't have both of your names on it, each one of you has to provide one each to substitute that. And that has to be across the period of 2.5 years because that's generally the period when somebody's already in the UK. Next question. What is adequate maintenance if I'm receiving benefits? You have to be receiving a very specific type of benefit, which means PIP, disability living allowance, carer's allowance, and there are a few others. You have to be receiving those specific benefits, and then the Home Office adds up all the income that you have, including these benefits, takes that away from your living expenses, which is rent and mortgage or council tax, and then whatever you're left with has to be the same as or greater than a family your size living on income support. Now that sounds really complicated, but again, I've done a video on that. That video goes into detail about it, and also it goes a little bit slower so you can follow it up. Next question. Can I apply as an unmarried partner? Requires 2 years cohabitation? No, it does not require 2 years cohabitation. Cohabitation is an easier way of meeting this requirement because it's the best type of evidence. However, there was a court case which determined that cohabitation is not necessary. So you can be in a genuine and subsisting relationship of an unmarried partner without actually living with one another, but you're going to have to be able to prove it. Next question. What are the accommodation requirements for a spouse visa? The accommodation requirement is effectively this. There's enough room in that property without contravening overcrowding legislation, and you have the permission of the person who owns the property for this person to come and live there. Generally speaking, this is all there is. I've done a video on that too, where I break down exactly what the accommodation requirement is and exactly what overcrowding is. Now, that is the important one. Go and have a look at that. And the video also goes into detail about what do you do in a situation where you're renting and the landlord doesn't give you permission for your partner to come and live there, because that is a bit of a stick in the mud. And they do that because they're scared about what will happen to them if they inadvertently breach the immigration rules and have somebody who is not entitled to live there living in their property. They face a huge fine, so they're very, very apprehensive about that. Have a look at that video. It goes into detail about it. Next question. How do I meet the English test requirement? Well, you sit the English test. The first English test is A1, the second one is A2, and the third one is B1 if nothing has happened in between. The Home Office are talking about pushing this up, but they haven't done so at the time of recording this video. And there are specific providers for these tests. There are 4 specific providers. Have a look on the government website. It should tell you exactly what they are. Next question. What is the total cost of the visa, application fee and immigration health surcharge? This differs slightly. If somebody's outside the country, they're going to be paying in the region of about £1,900 for the application and about £3,100 for the immigration health surcharge. So that comes to near enough £5,000. If somebody is inside the country, then they're going to be paying in the region of about £1,300 for the application and about £2,600 for the immigration health surcharge, which comes to about £4,000. That is the cost. Next question. What is the current processing time for a spouse visa? In the region of about 3 to 4 months. The Home Office was backed up a little while ago, but now they've caught up. Do I need a lawyer to apply for my spouse visa? I would recommend that you do, but that's not only because I'm a solicitor and I've seen a lot of horror stories, but it's only because the rules are constantly changing. And because the rules are changing and they're very evidence-based, and I've also seen a lot of documents in terms of how people would send the Home Office documents. Most of them are illegible, most of them are cut off, they are blurry, most of the documents aren't even necessary, which goes against the document reduction policy, and the rest of the documents are not complete. You get some of them where the bank statements are 5 months instead of 6 months, and they don't know that the Home Office has a policy where if you're missing bank statements from the middle, they can ask you for it, but if you're missing bank statements from the start or the end, they will refuse the application without giving you an opportunity. And there's various things like that that will catch you out. And if your application is refused, a lawyer is then going to charge you extra in order to do a second application, especially if on the first application they refuse it for deception and ban you for 10 years. So all of that could happen. But if you do want to do the application yourself, this is what you need to read. You need to read the partner guidance. You need to read Appendix FM partner rules. You need to read Appendix FM SE. You need to read part suitability. And you need to read every single document that these refer to. Go ahead, it's easy. Can I apply for a spouse visa from inside the UK? Yes, you can. We normally deal with people who are outside the UK and we make the application from inside the UK. The only thing is we're submitting it online. So it's a very different process to how it used to be back in the days, back before I even started immigration. So now we submit it online. And when we submit it online, the person there outside the country, they're the ones who go with their ID and give their fingerprints at a service center in their country. So it is as the application was submitted outside the country, but all the work can take place inside the country. Next question. What are the top reasons for a spouse visa being refused? Oh my God, there are so many reasons. There are so many reasons. If you just take a glance at part suitability, you will see that there are about 50 reasons just there. But normally it's because you haven't provided the right documentation or the right documentation in the right format. You haven't answered the questions properly. Some of these answers could be very confusing. You haven't shown the income properly. You haven't shown the relationship properly. You haven't shown the accommodation requirement properly. You've sat the wrong English test. You haven't done the TB test. There are various reasons. Once again, which is why I say get your application done by a lawyer. Next question. What should I do if my spouse visa application is refused? There we go. We finally get there. Go to a solicitor. Honestly, that is the only way. That is the only way if your application has been refused. But then again, it really does depend, because sometimes it's refused and the Home Office have refused it for a very silly reason, in which case you can do a pre-action protocol or you can go to court. Sometimes your application is refused and the law has changed, which means that you want to keep your application on the previous law, which means you'd have to go to court as opposed to make a new application. This happened when the income requirement was 18,600 and it changed to 29,000. A lot of applications were submitted during that period and a lot of people submitted them themselves. When those applications were refused, Instead of making new applications, I suggested that you go to appeal, depending, of course, on the merits of appeal, because that will keep them on the 18,600 as opposed to put them on the 29,000. But it all depends on the reason for the refusal. But go to a solicitor, and that's how you figure that out. Next question. What are the kind of questions in a spouse visa interview? Really good question. The kind of questions they ask you are directly related to your relationship. They're questions that only you would know. What color are the walls? How many TVs do you have in your bedroom? Blah, blah, blah. Have a look at one of my videos. I've done an actual video on that goes into detail about each category of questions that they would ask you. Because I attend a lot of these interviews and I know exactly what the questions are, or the most common questions are. Next question. What if I don't know the answer to a question in an interview? Well, in those particular circumstances, it's probably better to let them know that you don't know the answer. You don't want to end up giving wrong information. But remember, it has to be reasonable for you to not know that answer. You can't just say, I don't know what color her eyes are. You can't just say, I don't know what time she wakes up in the morning, when you've been saying you cohabitate. So think about the kind of question they're asking you and answer it to the best of your abilities. We normally offer this service where we go through mock interviews with you just to give you an example of how to answer questions, because in that situation where you're being questioned, it's not natural for most people. And so we sort of prepare you in that way. We ask you a few questions and we ask both of you questions, then we sit down together and we say, okay, well, how did that feel? And then we prepare you in that way. Exactly what we do when we take clients to court. We question them beforehand and we prepare them for that intense environment. Next question. How do I prove I've met my partner in person? Really good question. This is a main requirement in relation to a partner visa. So you show this by sending pictures to the Home Office, showing both of you together. But now there's AI, so I suspect the Home Office won't just accept pictures on their own. If they're in another country and you flew there, you need to show flight tickets. And the Home Office accepts certain types of evidence and don't accept certain types of evidence. So what they usually actually accept is booking confirmations and boarding passes. That's what they usually accept. And stamps on your passport, of course. And that is the best way to show on the balance of probability that you did go and you did meet this person. Next question. Can I work in the UK on a spouse visa? Yes, you can. You can work, you can study, you can pretty much do whatever you want. A spouse visa is actually quite an open, broad kind of visa. So you're pretty much free to do whatever you want as long as you don't commit any offenses or break up your relationship. Next question. When can I apply for indefinite leave to remain, ILR? Usually 5 years. Yes, it's usually 5 years. So what happens is you come into the country, you get your first visa, which is going to be 2.9 years. And then you get your second one after 2.9 years, which will be 2.5 years, and by then hopefully you've completed 5 years in the UK and you apply for indefinite leave to remain. There you go. Next question. What are the requirements of a spouse visa extension? And this happens to be the last most asked question. The requirements are very simple. Number one, relationship requirement. The relationship is genuine and subsisting, which is still the same as entry clearance. Number two, the financial requirement, that you still meet the financial requirement. Again, very similar to the entry clearance requirement. Then you've got the accommodation requirement. Again, very similar. Then you've got the English requirement, where here you're going to be satisfying A2 instead of A1. So generally what's happening here is that the Home Office are allowing you to come into the UK on a probationary period of 5 years. Of course, it can be extended if there are issues with your visa, but generally it's 5 years. Within this probationary period, you have to show the Home Office that you will continuously meet the requirement. And the way they test this is every 2.5 years, based on whatever type of financial income you're receiving and what kind of documents you need to show to prove your relationship and your finances. So last 6 months, last 2.5 years, so on and so forth. So generally speaking, that is it. And those are the most top asked questions. If you have any other questions, fire them at us. We have a lot of fun putting them together and a lot of fun answering them. And of course, if you want us to consider your application, feel free to get in contact with us.